I'm Owen Bigland. This is the Inside Edge video blog. Okay, I think you guys are going to like this one. As you guys know, for years and years, I've been saying that the governments at all levels in Canada here, city of Vancouver, city of Richmond, city of Burnaby, provincially with the NDP and federally with the Liberals, have been speaking with forked tongue. You know, they always talk about making homes more affordable for Canadians, making rents more affordable for renters. But as I've said, the biggest input cost to building new housing comes from the government in the form of various fees, taxes, zoning, community amenities contributions, sidewalks, sewer upgrades, you name it. They are the biggest winner and take the largest portion of the proceeds from every house sold in Canada by far. And here is an article. I'm finally starting to see this getting reported more, and I think you guys are going to be pretty interested in this, because what's starting to happen now is these governments, of course, they have taxed us to death. We pay some of the highest income taxes anywhere in the world. I'm taxed right now at about 50% of what I earn. So I work for free for the first 6 months to pay the government, and then they let me keep the other 6 months. But our property taxes have also been getting ratcheted up on a pretty consistent basis here over the last 10 years that I'm going to talk about. So they've taxed us to death. They've almost stretched that elastic as far as it can go. Yet we're still broke. And so what they're starting to do now is they are, for the last 10 years or so, they have been passing on all these fees, permitting, all this other stuff onto the developer. And they haven't increased it by 100% or 200% or 300%, 400, nope. Over the last 11 years in Toronto, as I'm going to get to, and Vancouver would be the same way, they have increased these fees to developers over the last 11 years by 592%. So sixfold. In other words, if they were paying $25,000 on a typical condo to build a typical one-bedroom condo 11 years ago, they're now charging $150,000 for that same one-bedroom condo. And things like sewer upgrades, sidewalks, parks, various infrastructure that used to be covered by our property taxes, by our provincial sales taxes, to some extent by income taxes. These costs used to be borne by those taxes. But you see, they've stretched those so far out, they're hiding them now by passing this on to developers, making them the bad guy, because of course they then have to pass that on in the finished product of the home. So it's sleight of hand, smoke of mirrors, which I'd expect nothing else from a socialist government, which we've been under here for the last decade. That's how they roll. They hide everything that they're doing and try and make another guy out as the boogeyman, which is the developer in this situation. So developers now have had enough, and I knew this day was coming. I knew eventually you stretch the taxes so far. People keep complaining about what it's costing to buy a pre-sale condo. They're not buying them anymore because they're too expensive. And you hit a breaking point, and we've hit that breaking point. So, September 9th issue of the Globe and Mail. You guys should go look this up. I was able to access this article. It was not behind a paywall. A lot of the Globe and Mail stuff now, as you guys know, you have to be a member of the Globe and Mail. But one out of every 5 or 6 articles, like this one, which is a doozy, they will make for free for all Canadians. So the September 9th issue of Globe and Mail, it's entitled "The Biggest Tax You Have Never Heard Of." And it talks about how municipalities, City of Vancouver, City of Toronto, all of them, have ratcheted up their development costs 3, 4, 5, 6-fold. So it's 600% in Toronto, and I can tell you it'd be right around the same in Vancouver here. 500, 600% over the last 10 or 11 years. So again, if you had to pay $25K in development fees and everything else to a government 11 years ago, they want $150 from you now. And these costs used to be paid for out of government coffers that was collected through property taxes, income taxes, and various other taxes they charge us. Now they're passing the buck on to the developer to make them, they're hiding it, in other words. And yet these municipalities and cities are still broke. It's nuts. So now these builders in Ontario, and Vancouver's going to follow suit here, they've had enough of this. So now what they want to do is they want to start now selling these condos and have an itemized invoice on what exactly the end buyer, the consumer, the buyer, is paying for this condo. And I think it's a fantastic idea. Let's expose where the money that you're paying for a new one-bedroom condo in Vancouver, who gets that money? A lot of people right now think the developer is, if you're selling a one-bedroom, let's say out in Brentwood, for $695,000, people think, hey, the developers are making off like bandits. That's a lot of money. They've got a big profit margin in there. Well, they don't. They make a decent amount of profit, as I've talked about many times on other blogs, based on the risk they take and the 7, 8, 9, 10 years it takes for them to buy the land, secure it, get through the NIMBYs, get all the approvals, the zoning, pay all these fees to the various levels of government, build it, pre-sell it, and then get their money. So they want to do an itemized list. So an example would be if you were to buy, let's say, a $550,000 junior one bed in Richmond or Brentwood. So you walk into that display center and they would say, yeah, your price on this one bedroom with parking, $550,000. But Mr. Buyer, here is the full invoice. We're going to show you exactly what your final cost would be. We have to pay for that unit $26,000 in community amenity contributions, another $24,000 in zoning, another $25,000 in infrastructure, sewer, water, road, sidewalk, another $10,000 for school and transit. It would be just a laundry list. It would be as long as your arm, this list that we've had to pay federal, provincial, and municipal governments to deliver this condo. So your $550 would quickly add up to $700,000. And I think this is a fantastic idea. Let's expose this. Where is this money going? The governments have their hand out here. They are the biggest, they are the ones collecting the biggest windfall on every home built in the province. But they never talk about it though. All these politicians ever talk about is making homes more affordable. Well, one of the easiest ways to make homes much more affordable would be to cut all the bureaucracy, all the fees, and having your hand out at every corner to these developers. So instead of $550, all of a sudden it would quickly tally up with all the taxes and everything else they got to pay to government, $700,000. Plus you've got another 5% GST on that. Plus you've got another 2% PTT or more, depending on what you buy, on the purchase price. So you can see where this all adds up. We're not even getting into the GST and PTT on this invoice yet. So it's absolutely crazy, guys, what's going on here. Read the article. You see what they're doing, it's sleight of hand. If these governments would have raised your property taxes over the last 11 years, 600%, you would have rioting in the streets. I mean, when they raise our property taxes 5, 6, 7%, which they've pretty much done consistently here, you already get a vocal amount of people that are saying this is crazy. I'm paying more and more taxes every year, but what do I get in return for it? And they're right. But can you imagine if they pass these fees on in the form of property taxes or other fees that are much more transparent? They would be boycotting, they would be storming City Hall in protest to this. So this is an easy way for them to sidetrack a lot of this, push it on to the developer, let them be the bad guy on this. So the other thing the developers want to do is, I think a lot of people don't realize, is Canadians, we are paying tax on top of tax, because when you pay that PTT and the GST, it is based on your final selling price, which is $700,000, which has another $150,000 on a typical one bed, over $200,000 on a two bed, padded into that price. So they're saying that, you should be paying GST and PTT on the price before we pay the various levels of government the tax. So it should be based on $550, not on the $700. In other words, you're paying tax on top of tax. I would love to see this. Now, you better believe that the mayors of Burnaby and Richmond and Vancouver not want anything to do with this. They don't want you to know about this stuff. Either does EB. But this is what's happening here, guys. We have hit a breaking point here where developers are really struggling right now. Most of it is government is causing most of their problems. It's that old saying that government isn't the solution to your problems. Government is your problem, especially when you're dealing with socialist governments. Remember, guys, socialist governments don't build anything. They're not about growing the economy. They're not about any of that. They're about repressing things, taxing everything, keeping everything down. That's their whole game plan, because then they get you into their cocoon and you keep voting for them. That's why they keep growing the public sector, the government. I think Trudeau, in the last 10 years when he was in power, grew the public sector, the government jobs, by over 30%. They do that because that's their voter base. They're buying votes with that. Keep you in power, keep my cushy job and everything else. So let's see what happens with this. You guys should read this article. I'll give you a couple other little things here, couple of little tidbits here from the front lines. As you guys know, when somebody approaches me about a land assembly or a large unit assembly, oftentimes every couple of years I'll get approached by some sellers wanting to know if I would take that kind of work on. And I always politely decline. I say I'm a residential realtor. That is out of my realm of expertise, but I have a heavy hitter here in Vancouver with JLL, a commercial brokerage, who I recommend them to. So I had one about 3 years ago. It was an entire block on Nanaimo Street. One of the sellers was my client, and I referred them to my guy, my commercial realtor. He ended up selling the entire block. It was already zoned for 3-story condo or stacked townhouses with a pretty good FSR. So the sellers on that block got a very nice price, and this was about 3 years ago. But I was talking with him about a year after the sale had gone through, and they were getting ready to build and pre-sell this development, which is now pretty much complete. I think it completes later this fall. But he was telling me some stories in this exact instance, in this Nanaimo one, where long after the sale had been completed, the city of Vancouver came to this developer, and these developers, they have to develop what's called a pro forma. So how much are they going to pay for the land? How much is it going to cost to tear down the homes? How much is it going to cost to build? What can we build? What's the FSR? What's the price per square foot we can charge for these? So they have to break all that down. It's very sophisticated. But he tells me that more and more now, the city of Vancouver is coming to these developers with these unexpected fees that they want. And on this particular one, it was something around $1 million, $1.1 million they wanted from this developer unexpectedly. They had already figured out all the costs for the city. But hey, we want some certain amount of sewer and water and storm sewer upgrades that we want you to pay for. And again, a lot of this used to come out of the government coffers, out of the city municipal coffers through our property taxes. But they're diverting it all now, putting it all onto the developer. The developer had no choice. He has to pay it. He's already bought the land. He's already moving forward with construction. What do? They hold you for ransom on this, is what they essentially do. But you can bet that $1 million, let's say it works out to another $4,000 or $5,000 or $6,000, $10,000 maybe per unit. They just pass that on, tack another $10,000 on to every unit they sell. That's where that goes. It's a hidden tax. So you got to wonder, with all the taxes we're paying in Canada, our property taxes keep going up. And now they've raised development fees in the last 11 years by 600%, which gets passed on in the final selling price of what you and I are buying in new homes, condos, duplexes, townhomes, whatever you're buying. It's all passed on. So it's nuts. We've hit a breaking point now. Again, the cost to build these pre-sales now has gotten so out of whack. Buyers are rejecting the prices. Now we're in a real quagmire. Now we're not building anything. Something's got to give, and in my opinion, the government is going to have to back off into some of these fees. But of course, we're all broke. One final thing I'll leave you with here, and I'll do another blog on this down the road here. Where does our money go? Well, I don't know. Listen, I own some properties in Richmond, as you guys know, some older wood frames that I bought 25, 30 years ago. So I've owned these for a long time. And I'll be right up front with you, I don't sell much, but I'm getting older now. I've lost the leverage on these condos. They're paid off. I've got very little mortgage or no mortgage at all. So as my tenants start to give me notice on this, I'm probably going to sell these over the next few years, one at a time. As my tenants give me notice, I'll clean it up, paint it, fix it up, put it on the market. But one of the things that gripes me about Richmond, if you guys live in Richmond, you know that they work on a dual tax system. and which meaning you get a property tax every year and you get a City of Richmond utilities tax every year. Now, back 20 years ago, if my property taxes were $500 a year, my utilities tax was about $100 a year. It was about a quarter of what my property taxes were, or maybe a little less, 20%. But this is the trick Richmond's doing now too. Over the last 10 years, they have ratcheted up that utilities tax to where the point is now where my utilities tax is almost the same as my property tax. My current property tax on some of these older wood frames runs about $1,200–1,300 a year. My utilities tax is $1,150. So now I'm paying $2,500 in total tax for a $425,000 wood frame. That is about double what I pay for something of similar value in Vancouver. So where does all the money go? You know, they're drunk on this revenue and it's sleight of hand. They raise it up. Rather than hit you with a 15% property tax note increase, because people will boycott that, we'll just give you a 7% increase, but we'll bump up the utilities tax. And we'll keep passing more fees on to developers for building new condos, which you end up paying for anyways. It's really nuts. You know, on another note, I'll have to do another update on this. You know, if you guys, I don't know if you know this, but City of Richmond currently has not one, but 2 RCMP investigations going on for misappropriation of funds and accounting irregularities. So it turns out the first one was they had been doling out, they bought something like $300,000 or $350,000 worth of gift cards to restaurants. And they dole those out like Tic Tacs to people for morale boosters of some sort. They opened up that investigation and they quickly found another one now where they spent $140,000 on a Christmas party last year. Again, as a morale booster. They're already making great money as a government worker, city worker, but I guess, you know, they need to give them more things to keep them employed. It's nuts. Now, I can tell you, those are just the first 2. It's just the tip of the iceberg. There's way more stuff than that going on that we don't know about. I think all these municipalities should face a forensic audit. City of Vancouver, City of Burnaby, City of Richmond, and let's have a breakdown of where all these taxes are going. Because it's not just your property taxes, it's not just your Richmond utilities tax. They are taxing you, ghost tax they're putting on developers, putting it on them to try and hide the extra revenue they're taking in. And where does it all go? Who knows? Gift cards and expensive office parties, I guess. So have a look at this Globe and Mail, September 9th, the biggest tax that you've never heard of. And I think this is going to be one of the first dominoes here, that we've hit a breaking point here. We've taxed everything to death. Now we're passing all these 600% increase to the developers over the last 11 years. That just gets passed on to the end product. Nobody's buying these pre-sales anymore because this is one of the reasons. They've raised the development fees by 600%. It's nuts. I'm Owen Bigland. As always, thanks for watching. See you guys next time.